Hello, my friends. It's good to speak to you once more. I had a little bit of trouble deciding what to call this video. I knew that I wanted to describe certain aspects to you, but how to define it, I wasn't quite sure. So I settled in my mind on the title, Is Jesus Authentic? Now, what do I mean by that? The dictionary definition of authentic is of undisputed origin and not a copy, genuine. So is Jesus' origin undisputed? By origin here, I don't mean his birth. I mean his life story, his narrative, the way he's been portrayed over the centuries to people. And in doing so, I want to take a look at 4 specific aspects of Jesus in this video. Number 1, when did Jesus die? The second one, I want to talk about Josephus' friends on the cross. The third one, I want to speak about Jesus ben Ananias. And the fourth one, I want to speak about Jesus ben Pantera. But before we get into that, we need to understand just what a common name Jesus or Yeshua was at the time. In Josephus' writings, he mentions at least 20 different Jesuses. Amongst them are Jesus, the son of Ananias. He's the one who was arrested by the Romans, tortured, declared insane, and then released. Jesus, the brother of John, although this Jesus was killed by John. And Jesus, the son of Ananias. And this Jesus we'll get to in a minute. Just among the high priests, there was Jesus, the son of Fabius, or Phoebe, from 25 BCE. Jesus, the son of Sic, from 1 BC. Jesus, son of Damnius, from 63 AD. Jesus, son of Gamaliel, of 64 AD. And Jesus, the son of Josedek. There were so many Jesuses running around preaching. Even Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 verse 4 warned his friends, "For if someone comes and proclaims another Jesus than the one we proclaimed." So could the Jesus we know have been glommed together from several different characters to make up a mythical character, to make up a mythical person? Now, I'm not a mythicist. I do believe there was a Jesus. Probably because of my indoctrination into Christianity from a very young age. If I had to take a undoctrinated look at the facts surrounding Jesus, I probably would have been a mythicist. But for now, I'm not, and that's probably due to my upbringing. But I'm not focusing here on a mythical Jesus. I'm focusing now on a Jesus that actually existed, as in a person that walked, talked, preached, a charismatic leader of some kind. I am not speaking about the magical Jesus. I'm not speaking about the miracles. I'm not talking about the walking on water, the turning water into wine, raising the dead and healing the sick, lame and the blind. Could this composite character be made up of several different parts? Perhaps we could get a little bit closer to an answer if we take a look at these 4 points that I'd like to bring up today. All right, so the first one is, when did Jesus die? All right, so when it comes to the death of Jesus, what sources do we have? Essentially, we have the Gospels and a spattering of mentions extra-biblically. And those will help us to perhaps determine when did Jesus die. Is it possible to know when Jesus died? I mean, this happened so long ago. Is it possible to get an accurate date? One of the easiest ways of establishing whether a date is possible for early characters, let's take a look at some other famous people from history. Do we know when Julius Caesar died? Sure we do. He died on the 15th of March 44 BC. What about Cleopatra? 10th of August 30 BC. Nero? 9th of June 68 AD. What about Pope Linus? 23rd of September 76 AD. Emperor Hadrian, 10th of July 138 AD. Emperor Guanyu of Han, 29th of March 57 AD. What about the Chinese warlord Cao Cao? He died on the 15th of March 220 AD. Liu Bei, the founder of the Shin Han dynasty, 10th of June 223 AD. Right, so these are just some of the characters of history. And we have a date, a day, month, and a year of death. So when did Jesus die? This is where it gets a little bit hazy. All right, so as I mentioned, when it comes to the sources for the death of Jesus, we essentially have the Gospels. Now, I know that there are discrepancies about when, according to the Gospels, Jesus died. Different Gospels have him dying on different days. That's not my point at the moment. I'm not going to go into that, although it is well documented and that there are videos out there about that. Dr. Bart Ehrman has some very good material on it. That's not what I'm aiming for today. What I would like to take a look at today is, let's assume that Jesus died on or around Passover, which is close enough for our point today. All right, so when is Passover? According to the Hebrew and Babylonian calendars, Passover falls on the 14th day of Nisan, which is the day of barley ripening, and it's also the first day of spring. And we know this because of Leviticus 23 verse 5. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, is the Lord's Passover. Now we need to figure out in which year did Jesus die. All right, so let's try and narrow it down. In Josephus' writings, The Antiquities of the Jews, in book 18, chapter 3, he describes Jesus as being killed under Pontius Pilate. And we know Pilate governed Judea from 26 AD when he took over procuratorship from Gratus. Tacitus, in book 15, chapter 44 of his book Annals, describes Jesus' death being under the rule of Tiberius. In book 18, chapter 42 of Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus tells us that Pilate, once he was relieved of office, of procuratorship in Judea, traveled to Rome, where he found Tiberius had already died on the 16th of March, 37 AD. So considering he traveled 4,000 kilometers from Judea to Rome, which is about 2,400 miles. This is about a 3-month journey if everything goes well. And he arrived in Rome finding that Tiberius had already died in March. This means that he had been relieved of his office at the end of 36 AD. The best we can decipher from external biblical sources is that Jesus died between 26 AD and 36 AD after looking at those facts. Then what was the exact date of Jesus' death? Well, it depends on what year it is, because the 14th day of Nisan falls on a different day depending on the year. If he died in 26 AD, which is the earliest possible date, then he would have died on the 21st of April. In 27 AD, it would have been the 10th of April. If he had died on in 28 AD, it would have been the 30th of March. If he died 29 AD, it would have been the 18th of April. If he had died 30 AD, it would have been the 7th of April. If he died 31 AD, the 27th of March. 32 AD, the 13th of April. 33 AD, the 3rd of April. 34 AD, the 24th of March. 35 AD, the 12th of April. Or 36 AD, the 31st of March. That is the best we can do for a date of Jesus' death. How is it possible we can know the exact date of the death of hundreds of people in history? And I only mentioned a very small few of them because this video just wouldn't be long enough. We know the dates of death of people in BC, in the 1st century, in the 2nd century. So it's not like we can't tell when people died. We have dates of death. How is it possible that we cannot know the date of the death of the most important person in the history of the world? Now I'd like to tackle the second of my topics for the day. And this one is Josephus' friends on the cross. Josephus was for a time a general in command of the Jewish forces in Galilee during the Great Revolt against Rome. This was around the time that the Jewish temple was destroyed in 70 AD. In his book, The Life of Flavius Josephus, Josephus writes, "And when I was sent by Titus Caesar with cerealins and 1,000 horsemen to a certain village called Thesoa, in order to know whether it were a place fit for a camp. As I came back, I saw many captives crucified, and remembered 3 of them as my former acquaintance. I was very sorry at this in my mind, and went with tears in my eyes to Titus, and told him of them. So he immediately commanded them to be taken down, and to have the greatest care taken of them in order to their recovery. Yet 2 of them died under the physician's hands, while the 3rd recovered. The parallels between Jesus' crucifixion account and this story by Josephus are staggering. Firstly, 3 men are crucified in both stories. Josephus asks for the 3 men to be taken down, and Joseph asks for one of the men to be taken down. So essentially in each story, a man named Josephus and a man named Joseph of Arimathea both ask Titus or Pilate to take down men off the cross. 2 of them die in both cases. One survives in Josephus's case because of a specialized medical attention, and Jesus in the other narrative is resurrected and lives on. If this is a retelling of the same story, who is copying from whom? This is a topic I'm going to cover in much greater detail in a future video, where we can take a look at were the Gospels retellings and rewritings of other previously recorded by other authors stories, and retold and rewritten in the divinity narrative. This leads me to the third of my topics for the day, Jesus ben Ananias. In chapter 5, book 6 of his work, The Jewish War, Josephus tells of a character named Jesus ben Ananias, which is often translated as Ananias. And according to Josephus, this Jesus was a commoner that wandered around Palestine, prophesying the destruction of Jerusalem. The similarities between Jesus, son of Ananias, as depicted in Josephus's works, and Jesus, the Son of God, as depicted in the Gospel of Mark, are, in the words of Dr. Richard Carrier in his book on the historicity of Jesus, too numerous to be at all probable as a coincidence. When you have 1 or 2 similarities, you could chalk it up to coincidence. But when you have a whole slew of them that are virtually identical, somebody copied from someone. Both Jesus of Nazareth and Jesus ben Ananias were believed by the leaders of Jerusalem to be demon-possessed. They were both in the temple during the holy festival. They both cited Jeremiah 7 to denounce temple practices. They both pronounced doom on the temple. They were both arrested by the leaders of Jerusalem. Both were accused of speaking against the temple. Neither offered any defense against the accusations. Both were physically abused at the Jewish hearing. Both were delivered to the Roman procurator following the Jewish hearing. Both were interrogated by the Roman governor. They were both asked to disclose their identity, and both were silent before the governor. They were both scourged after the hearing. They were both killed by Roman soldiers. Both of them uttered a personal cry of woe before death, and both of them died with a loud cry. So who copied from whom? This is actually a very interesting question. Josephus completed writing his Jewish War around 75 AD, and the book of Mark is considered to have written around 70 AD. These 2 facts alone don't necessitate that Josephus necessarily copied from the author of the book of Mark. Josephus could have had draft versions of his writings many years previous. I know from personal experience from the book I'm writing, I've been busy with this thing for a good couple of years already. I'm not even complete. Draft versions are around for many years before the final version comes out. So either one could have copied from the other. However, this is all purely academic. If Mark had copied from Josephus, then Jesus as portrayed in the Gospel of Mark is at best a rehashing of a previously existing character, and at worst a purely fictional character. If Josephus had copied from Mark, why bother changing the name of the character? Just retell the story with the character with the name it originally had. Why not simply tell a historic account of Jesus of Nazareth? Could it be that Jesus of Nazareth, an itinerant preacher who died an entirely unmemorable, dishonorable death, was later exalted by his followers, and stories added into as a result, and memorialized as such in the ensuing Gospels? And finally, we get on to the last of the four topics for today, Jesus ben Pantera. Celsus, a Greek philosopher who lived in the 2nd century, wrote the following. Jesus had come from a village in Judea and was the son of a poor Jewess who gained her living by the work of her own hands. His mother had been turned out of doors by her husband, who was a carpenter by trade, on being convicted of adultery with a soldier named Pantera. Being thus driven away by her husband and wandering about in disgrace, she gave birth to Jesus, a bastard. Jesus, on account of his poverty, was hired out to go to Egypt. While there, he acquired certain magical powers which Egyptians pride themselves on possessing. He returned home, highly elated at possessing these powers, and on the strength of them gave himself out to be a god. So according to Celsus, the real father of Jesus was a Roman soldier named Pantera. Initially my thoughts were, how could Celsus have known this 100 years later as fact? He was, after all, staunchly anti-Christian, and he could have made up the statement in an attempt to embarrass this fledgling religion. A tombstone was found in 1859 in Bingerbrook in Germany with the following inscription. Tiberius Julius Abdes Pantera from Sidon, aged 62 years, served 40 years. Former standard bearer of the first cohort of archers lies here. Panthera and its derivatives Pantera and Bandera were fairly common names at the time, especially amongst Roman soldiers. The cohors 1 Sagittorium, or the first cohort of archers, was stationed in Judea at the time. Roman soldiers who had to remain unmarried during their service were well known to have either had affairs with or raped women in the territories that they served in. And it's not inconceivable that many of these instances would have produced illegitimate children. Now, this story wasn't some originally made up thing by Celsus. It's also found in the Tosefta, which is the Jewish oral law from the period of the Mishnah. It's also found in the Kohelet Rabbah, and a Gadi commentary of Ecclesiastes, and it's also found in the Jerusalem Talmud, the rabbinic notes on the 2nd century Jewish oral tradition. In the Tosefta, the book of Chulun, chapter 2, verses 22 to 24, there are two mentions of a man named Jacob, who names his mentor as being Yeshu ben Pantera, which translates to Jesus, son of Pantera, where a miracle of healing is being performed in his name. So did Jesus' mother have an illicit affair with a Roman soldier named Pantera and fall pregnant by him? It's possible. Is it possible that Jesus' mother could have been raped by a Roman soldier named Pantera and fallen pregnant and had an illegitimate child as a result of the rape? It's possible. In both instances, it's just as likely, just as possible, that Mary would have been too embarrassed to mention the actual facts to anybody. So making up another story, especially in a culture of superstition and strange beliefs, making up a story that she was impregnated by God, if that is where the story originated, would have been a half-decent cover for it. In either case, which is more likely? That Mary either had an affair or was raped. Both instances are purely natural means, or that she was impregnated by the Holy Spirit. These are just four things worth pondering over. They're things that, when you think about, raise a certain amount of reasonable doubt about the authenticity of the story, the narrative of Jesus, as it is portrayed, as it is offered to us. And we need to take a hard critical look. Was Jesus the Son of God? Was Jesus the miracle man who did all the things as portrayed? This is important. If we are to believe the entire story, if we are to accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior, if we are to accept that Christianity is true, these things are important. Friends, thank you as always for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Keep well, keep safe. Goodbye.